Hello there travellers, I'm Benedict. We're making a video about the Brighton line, Britain's premier holiday route for more than 150 years, and telling you secrets of it, or at least fascinating bits and bobs that if you found it a boring commute or just want to go and have a look, we think will be fascinating. So here we are at the beginning in Victoria Station in London. Underneath this area behind me there's the underground station, and in there one of the 7 lost rivers of North London, the Tyburn, which carries with it a history of executions and plague and cholera that you don't want to know. It leaks 1 million gallons a day into the underground, and if that wasn't pumped up, everyone down there would drown, or the trains wouldn't run at any rate. Our ostensible reason for making this video is to plug this book, Britain from the Rails, a window gazer's guide, although if you read the reviews on Amazon you'll notice it sells itself pretty well, so we're just doing it for fun. Also, so below there's one story. Above here was a different story. Was during the war 3 German bombers were lining up for to attack Buckingham Palace, which is just a couple of streets away, and one Hurricane pilot, an immensely brave chap, shot down 2 of them, ran out of ammunition, so he just rammed the 3rd. I mean, what courage does that take to do that? Sliced its tail off. It crashed in the forecourt here and had to be put out by the fire brigade. His plane crashed in Birdcage Walk and buried itself well underground, and I'm happy to report he lived to a ripe old age, to the point where they dug his plane up again in recent years. But what an amazing thing to do. He survived. So this station, when you look inside, is very much in 2 halves, and that's because 2 companies built it and they hated each other. The Chatham company on one side and the Brighton company on the other. They wouldn't share canteens. Even in recent years this was the case, that one bench was for Brighton boys, one for the Chatham boys. And back in the day when there were 2 separate stations, they would run trains in front of each other to slow down and block the other one, be awkward, not take tickets. They expected you to walk out of the station to go into the other one. And when in the 1920s the companies were merged, common sense prevailed, and the big gap between the 2 halves was knocked in the wall where you walk through now. Points to notice in the station is therefore you've got 2 sets of First World War memorials, because they were separate companies. Worth a look, just how many names there are there. And also on the Brighton side there's a fascinating tiled map which is great because it shows you all the closed routes, like the direct route to Eastbourne, long gone, and also has this pretense that when you look at Portsmouth that there's no direct route to London via Guildford, which of course there was then and still is. And now, with privatisation of the companies operating, we've returned to that stage where people publish maps pretending you can't get from A to B without going through their company, which is fundamentally dishonest. But Brighton, we're going to brighten up the Brighton line with some fascinating bits and bobs. So let's go and take a ride. Set off, we leap across the Thames on the Grosvenor Bridge, which is in fact a set of parallel bridges because of the rivalry of the companies that hated each other. And upstream is the beautiful set of bridges, Battersea Bridge and Albert Bridge, which look so elegant. And then we swoop around past Battersea to join the lines coming from Waterloo. And then you have the thickest set of tracks anywhere in Britain, where there are always about 10 trains at once travelling in every direction. So that is the busiest stretch of railway in Britain. It's called Clapham Junction. It's not in Clapham, which is over there. It's in Battersea. But the railway thought Battersea was a bit scummy then, and so they dressed it up as Clapham Junction. It's now so posh it's called Clam, and Battersea is Battersia, or South Chelsea. And the other thing is the junction name's wrong too, because there is no Clapham Junction. There's about 6 junctions, each with their own names, such as Latchmere Junction, and so on. And the one place that should have been called Clapham Junction is in North Yorkshire, where there's a station called Clapham which then was a junction and could have been honestly called Clapham Junction. So this place is doubly misnamed, and no one on this station knows this except you and me. Now, onwards through the North Downs in this dramatic ride, then leaping across the Weald on a beautiful viaduct that nobody knows about much. Welcome to the Bulcombe Viaduct in Sussex, or to give it its proper name, the Ouse Valley Viaduct, of which a train is helpfully going over right now. This viaduct is often given the title of the most elegant railway viaduct in Britain, and I think it's a contender. I mean, there's a lot of options there. There are certainly more magnificent viaducts and more moody viaducts and more strategically important viaducts, but this one has a certain quality, and that's because of the genius chief engineer of the Brighton line, John Rastrick, who had this Victorian capability of making a virtue of a necessity, which means not just designing something like a multi-storey car park that does a job, but also making it look beautiful too. And so in his case, he's got these 37 semi-elliptical, well, hemispherical, semicircular arches, if you like, which make this magnificent shape. He's got the stone balustrade, which ornaments it nicely. And he's even a brilliant touch, put 4 pavilions on each end, that's 8 in total. These little huts on the top that just give it a finishing touch. The engines were so feeble that engineers had to get things across on the level, more or less, across a valley like this, and they had to build deep cuttings and tunnels through the hills because the engines couldn't cope. And that's paid enormous dividends for us for the centuries to come, because every journey is faster and more comfortable and less fuel is used than if it was a steeper journey. And later, when the engines got better, later 19th century railways, like not much later than this, the Portsmouth Direct Line, were kind of corkscrewing up the hills like this, and you have to hang on to your coffee cups on the bends, and loads of fuel's used, and they slither to a halt in the leaf-fall season. So early railways like the Brighton line, only 14 years after the first intercity railway in Britain, and the Great Western out of Paddington and the London South Western out of Waterloo, their level playing field or billiard table-like approach to railways has paid off wonders. And there's another thing about this viaduct which is rather wonderful that you should come and see, a hidden secret you would never know when you're on the train. This huge thing was constructed with 11 million bricks, which you wonder how the hell did they get these here in the days of horses and carts and muddy lanes. And what they did was they dammed the stream at the bottom and made it temporarily into a canal that could carry barges up from Lewes with all these hundreds and hundreds of tons of bricks on. So they brought them up and gradually built this over a period of about 4 years altogether. And underneath here, unimagined to the passengers on the train above, is a quite extraordinary vista, which we'll show you in a second. And to me, this is a lovely, lovely surprise if you come for a walk down here, which I recommend. So when you get to the middle, you find that they have put what we call jack arches down the middle to make an elegant vista. And I think this is a cathedral to the railways, this view. This is better than any nave in Europe in terms of length of perspective. And I like the way that the bottom of the arches ascend gradually because of the hillside going up on the other side. Now, of course, it wasn't done for no purpose. Rastrick, the genius creating this thing, used 11 million bricks, but he would have had to use 15 million bricks to build without these jack arches. So this is something to think about as you hurtle on through Haywards Heath and south towards our next place to visit. Here we are on the Brighton line at a place called Clayton, which is just beyond Hassocks, where there is the most extraordinary and eccentric tunnel entrance and cottage you could imagine. It seems to be a Tudor castle, complete with battlements and arrow slits and so on. And it also perched on that is a little bungalow, which is a bit of a mystery. The castle design was the genius touch of the engineer John Rastrick, who built this line. The purpose of the little cottage is somewhat clouded, as indeed would be the inhabitants every 3 minutes during the steam era. We think that early on this tunnel was the longest in the south of England for a long time. We think early on people were quite afraid of going into tunnels and thought they were going to their doom. And so the directors thought, as a last touch to reassure them, to whitewash the inside of the tunnel and put hundreds of gas jets along to light it up so they could see something. And remember, people were in the third class, were in open trucks behind an engine belching steam and smoke. Very unpleasant. So that's probably what the cottage was originally for, a guy to tend the gas jets. Now we've arrived in Brighton, at the end of Britain's premier holiday line, and what a fantastic city it is. Completely unlike the much duller resorts along the south coast. Brighton's always had pizzazz, it's been outrageous, it was created by an adulterous Prince of Wales cheating with a rather ugly married woman, not the one we're talking about now. It's always had avant-garde people, lovies, theatre directors, adulterers, green people, gay people, etc. If Brighton isn't so shocking nowadays, it's because the rest of the country has caught up with Brighton's way of looking at things. The interior of the station is wonderful. This great curved train shed of Rastrick's, which is the original, and do look out for the LBSCR clock. Local wags called it the lay-back so comfortable railway. But before we go, let's pop down the side of the station and have a look at a completely different view of it that you never knew about. One thing people don't realise when they arrive at Brighton station is that the station itself is built high in the air, and the reason for that is that it was built in the downland, and around here were just sheep grazing and fields. There was none of the city that you see today, and the result is that the platform level is up where those blue columns end. Underneath there was masses of space for stables and storing wine and so on. There was a horse hospital down that end, and then underneath in the undercroft there was a sloping cab road so that horse-drawn cabs could take passengers up to the station level. So there's a lot of secret stuff hidden down there. But there's one more very curious thing about railway history that you must see that's down on the beach. Here we are on Brighton Beach, and there's an extraordinary relic behind me, the Volks Electric Railway, which was the first electric railway ever in Britain. And it was conceived by an enthusiast for electricity called Magnus Volk, who had electricity in his house when everyone else had gas or candles here in Brighton, and really was the first in the whole country. So all the subways and the Brighton line and so on could not exist without Magnus Volk's pioneering work. And even odder, out to sea there was a railway called the Daddy Longlegs Railway, which ran from that pier, Brighton Palace Pier, to Rottingdean, through the water, with great long legs reaching down into the water, and as far as I know is the only train in the world, railway carriage in the world, to have lifebelts for its passengers. Quite extraordinary. Now long gone, sadly. Thanks for watching the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you might enjoy my book, Britain from the Rails, A Window Gazer's Guide.